And now we're going to show you how to use our vermicompost bin. What's vermicompost? It's just a fancy word that means worm composting. So we use worms to break down food to create a really nice compost. This composting system is especially good for kitchen scraps, although it can also be good for some weeds from the garden. I'm going to show you how to use this, and you are welcome, garden members, you're all welcome to add kitchen scraps to the worm bin. I do think that this particular compost system is for those who are a little braver, and I'll show you why. So on the front of the box here, we have a carabiner. It's just to keep kids from playing with the compost bin. The lid is pretty heavy, and so if kids are opening and closing it, we're worried about the lid coming down on their fingers. So this is just to help keep kids out of it. So you can take the carabiner off and pull the lid up. It is pretty heavy, just so you know. And then we have on each side a big dowel rod that fits in to a groove on the roof and a groove on the wall. If you are just adding compost, you can just use one dowel rod. There's one on the other side too. If you are helping to move compost here or harvest worm castings, you'll probably want to put both dowel rods in. More on that in a second. So when you look in this bin, there's a lot of things that you're going to see. First of all, let me just explain what the bin is and what worm composting is. And then I'll tell you a little bit about the really delicious looking stuff we have going on in here. So first of all, this worm bin allows a specific kind of worm called a red wiggler. There, you can see a couple of them kind of hanging out on the edges here. They are not your typical earthworm. Earthworms burrow very deep into the ground, and red wigglers stay much closer to the surface. These are the kind of worms you would find in leaf piles, or like underneath like piles of litter in the yard, that kind of thing. They do not burrow very deep. They do a great job of breaking down organic material. So we feed them all different kinds of vegetable and fruit scraps, eggshells, you can see a lot of eggshells in here, and coffee grounds that have been spent. So coffee grounds before you make your coffee are very acidic, but once you brew coffee, it takes all the acid out of the coffee grounds, and it's a very neutral material that worms really love. We also add newspapers. We usually tear them into strips before we add it, and that makes a nice bedding for the worms. A couple of things that worms do not like. If you have a lot of citrus, they will avoid it. Eventually, it will begin to rot and break down, and they will come to it. But if you have a huge amount of citrus, I don't recommend tossing it in here. An occasional orange peel is fine. I don't know why this entire orange is in here. It looked like it would have been pretty edible before. But yeah, so if you have a whole huge amount of orange peels, you might not want to put all of that into the worm bin. Typically with the worm composting bin, people add their compostable material on the left. Everything we do with composting at the Lewisburg Garden goes from left to right. Just like you're reading a book, you start on the left and it works your way over to the right. So if you're adding material, put it on the left side here. Here things have gotten a little bit mixed up and there's material on both sides. But what we'll do is as the left gets full, the garden staff will move the compostable material over to the right and let that start to break down more with the worms and put fresh material on the left. What that does is the material on the right will eventually become what's called worm castings, which is just a fancy word for worm poop. Basically, those worm castings are a very high quality compost that can be added directly to a garden or can be used in potting mix to start seedlings. Please do not harvest from this bin. The garden staff will harvest from this bin. Please do not harvest from this bin. The garden staff will harvest from this bin. At the bottom of the bin, it's open to the ground. There's not another wall, but we did install a big screen to keep rodents out from entering the worm bin from underneath. The reason I'm asking you not to harvest is the sharp point of your shovel could easily cut through that screen and then allow rodents to come into our worm composting bin, which would not be very good. This bin is insulated, so inside the metal here is the same insulation you would use on a house, and that way these worms can continue to work all winter long. So this bin is functioning even in December, January, February. You can still add your kitchen scraps to this bin out here. And that is worm composting in a nutshell. So let me show you the creatures who are doing all this amazing work you can see a lot of little worms, and as I pull that material back, they're already trying to get out of the sunshine and get deeper into the compostable material. So they prefer to be deeper in where it's nice and cool and moist.